I say, or you hear, increase your standard of living, what do you think? What comes to your mind immediately? Mac and I had this conversation about a week and a half ago, and Mac was talking. He'd heard the statement that, well, we need to be prepared to reduce your standard of living. And I said, Mac, I've heard that too, but I want to say at this moment I totally disagree. Totally disagree, and I'll tell you why. We, as Christians, should be prepared to increase our standard of living. And we should be prepared to help others to increase their standard of living. And the reason I say that, and what we're going to look at here in a moment or two, is what Jesus told his disciples. I am the good shepherd, and I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly, not less. Now, unfortunately for most of us, when we think about standard of living, we think about money and we think about materialism. That's the immediate, that's the number one thing that comes into our thinking. And I understand that. And I recognize that in our economy that's in recession/depression that we're in, and in our morals as a country that is in recession and depression as well, in our values as a country and as a people that are also in all of those things, I must be reminded that in all of those things, you and I have an opportunity to increase our standard of living. We do not have to be in depression, and we do not have to be in recession in terms of our standard of living as Christians. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to have more dollars. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying in terms of what God has given to us and helps us to understand and appreciate is that He desires that our standard of living increase. Not only for ourselves, but for others as well. So our first thought along that line may be a little bit disbelief. Well, yeah, you got it good, so yeah, your standard of living is a lot better than mine, and the like. So the perception and the conception of this standard of living can be misguided on our part, because in God's world, in our world, it isn't tied to just materialism. It isn't just tied to dollars and cents. There is something else that God gives to us and helps us in our standard of living. And it's more than just worldly goods. Now, the Apostle Paul was a man who greatly reduced his standard of living. That is, materially, financially. Here he was, a scribe, a Pharisee. He had everything going for him. His future was bright, and of course we know that he had his encounter with Christ. And after that encounter, he found himself on the outs as far as the world was concerned, as far as materialism is concerned. He found himself a man kind of wandering around, doing the work which he had been given to do. But let's notice what the Apostle Paul was able to write and to tell the church at Philippi. This is in Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. And his situation was such that he was kind of funded by the membership in parts, and also that he did his own work. You know, he's a tent maker, and what he was trying to do, and let me put this out for you, he was trying to increase the standard of living among the church members. In this way, he says, I am not taking things from you. You know, I could demand that you send in more offerings. You know, the times are tough. We need a special offering for this and that. I can make it tougher. I haven't demanded that at all of you. I've rather left it to you. I haven't put a guilt trip on you in that regard, which is very important in increasing somebody else's standard of living, is not to do that, to put guilt and shame so that you can get what you want and build up your own. I just want to help us to kind of understand some of these things that Paul is saying. So he tells us, I am not saying this because I am in need. He says, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance. I know what it is to be in need. and I know what it is to have plenty. And I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. Now, He doesn't take the credit for all of this. Rather, and this is the important thing that I want us to recognize as well, what Paul is teaching us here, it isn't about us. It is about what God is doing and the strength that God gives us and the encouragement. You know, all this part of the worship service so far today has been encouraging. You're my all in all, what God has done. Show me how to love. It's about learning a way of life, learning a way to live. So Paul speaks of learning and he speaks of attitude. Paul also tells us, and this is one of the things I think that we learn, and Mac was talking about the grace of God as well, about being flexible. This is what the grace of God has taught us, and that's what we read even in the book of Ezekiel, a prophecy. I'll give them a new heart. I'll do this, and I'll do it for my name's sake. It isn't because we're something great. Now, this is very important for us to recognize because we as a nation are facing a time right now when our dominance in the world is going down the tube. It is going down the tube, and the reality, there's a little bit of a connection between Pentecost, the summer of Pentecost, and this time, in this way. Because you see, when God poured out His Spirit upon all mankind, upon the church, and Paul starts going to the Gentiles, all of a sudden this one nation, Israel, special, particular, and all of that, you've got to start welcoming in other people. The coming of Christ, you know, who God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in Him. It is not easy for Israel to accept somebody else into that family that God is building. And it's one of those things that we're having to deal with that is not comfortable for Americans, Protestant America. It is not easy for us to deal with. But at the same time, we have to recognize, as God dealt with Israel, and God worked with them in a particular way, and God gave them particular laws that said, you know, there'll be nobody like you if you follow this way. And it isn't about the culture, it's about following God and God's way. But it's important for us to understand. So Paul is teaching us a bit about flexibility. I can do this, I can do that. But the grace of God also helps us to understand, and Jesus helps us to understand in terms of flexibility and resiliency, which is also one way very helpful in living a higher standard of living, is not to be so rigid and not to be so black and white that let's take them out and stone them. Let's do this. They broke the law. They're a sinner. They're out of here. Forgetting about the kind of people that we ourselves have been. So one of the things that we learn in the grace of God, except for the grace of God, there go I, and we have a different approach towards other people, and all of a sudden your standard of living will change.
Feeling the blues today, or tired of life already? Do you have questions about life, or need spiritual advice? We can help. Log on to worldwidechurchofgod.com or wcgfairfield.blogspot.com and stay connected to reality. The Worldwide Church of God in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto are located in the San Francisco Bay Area, regarded as the most prosperous region in the United States. We believe Jesus Christ when He proclaimed in Matthew 6:24 that serving God is more important than serving mammon. We welcome everyone to come and worship and fellowship every Saturday at the times listed on your screen and on our website, worldwidechurchofgod.com.